My graduate advisor, John Murren, in his undergraduate classes used to say, in 1760, Great Britain had a 15-game lead with 20 games left to play. There's no way they can blow this. How did they do so? Well, stick around, he said, you'll find out. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that it's counterintuitive. It's unlike what we would expect, but the only way to understand the coming of the American Revolution is to first understand how deeply and sincerely convinced colonial Americans were that they were British and that they were loyal subjects of the British king. Because to be a loyal subject of the British king by the 6th decade of the 18th century meant that you had a certain standing and certain rights and could have certain expectations of government. The only reason they felt that they had that standing and those expectations and rights was because they were British. And it was when the British came to doubt the colonial Americans' Britishness and began to deny the access to those rights and to that standing and insist that they were something other than and less than British, that American colonists began to organize around the idea that they could not be safe any longer in the British Empire. But the only way that they could even understand how to articulate what was angering and what they felt that was being done to them was wrong was to first believe that they were British and therefore were entitled to all of the things that came with what they understood to be British liberties and independence. Why is it important to be British in 1760? Why would Americans or people living in Britain want to be British? And the way that they would explain it is that the key benefits of being British are first, that you're not French and therefore not Catholic, that Britain is a Protestant nation and a Protestant empire, and therefore is enjoined in a great and righteous and holy war against the forces of Antichrist, represented on earth by the Pope in Rome and the most powerful Catholic prince in Europe, which is the King of France. And that being Protestant also then went with the values that made Protestantism the only proper version of the Christian faith, that it was an open, enlightened religion of the book, not a religion of the word, of the book, of understanding, of comprehension, of civilization, as opposed to one of superstition and darkness and ignorance, all of which were fertile ground for despotism and oppression. And so interestingly, in many ways, they saw that kind of ideal Christianity as also connected with all sorts of economic rights and property rights. The Protestant, who came from an open, enlightened, civilized, progressive religion, was also a person who then could pursue his own ideals and interests in both spiritually, but also economically and materially. So it was Protestants, therefore, who could stress that the importance of liberty of conscience and liberty of freedom also came with the importance of liberty and freedom in general. And the only way to be truly free from a potentially oppressive state was to not be dependent upon that state. And the key way to not be dependent upon that state was to be able to have secure possession of your own property, of your own wealth, and to protect it from the state's effort to try and take it from you. Because people with their own property and their own wealth had the freedom to think for themselves, to act for themselves, and to criticize when necessary. And that's where we get this very famous phrase that everybody listening to us today will have heard of, this idea of no taxation without representation. That was the key way in which people in Britain and in the colonies, going all the way back to the 16th and 17th centuries, understood as the key way to protect their rights of property. And the thinking was that if you live in a state, if you live in a government, and the government needs to do all kinds of things that increasingly in the 17th and 18th centuries are becoming more expensive, it's reasonable that a government should tax, that we subjects should enjoy the benefits of the government and enjoy the protections and freedoms that government affords, should contribute to the well-being of that government. And the way they do that is by the government taking a portion of their property in the form of taxation and making use of it. That's what taxation is. That's what your parents are listening to. When they pay taxes, they're acknowledging the government is like to take a portion of their property to serve the broader public good. But the question is how much and who gets to determine? And what if a government becomes so powerful that it can tax away all of it to the point where you no longer have enough property to sustain your own freedom and then become ripe for despotism and oppression? And that's where this notion of how to protect property becomes such a key cardinal part of British liberties. And the way the British argue that they can both accept legitimate taxation, but also be safe in the property, is if two things are true. One is that those who are determining how much taxes are to be paid are chosen by the taxpayers, are elected by the taxpayers. And the second thing is that those who are doing the taxing are required to pay the same taxes they're requiring of other people. If you have both of those things, you have taxation connected to representation, and the taxpayers are choosing those who tax them, and the people who are doing the taxing are not expecting anyone to pay taxes they themselves also don't have to pay. that places a limit on how much a government would tax, because the taxers would be hurting themselves if they tax too much. And if the people that found it unacceptable, they could vote them out. And those are cardinal ideals of British liberty: the freedom to practice the proper Christian religion of Protestantism, and the freedom to be secure in your property, which go hand in hand. And those are things that the British believed in the 18th century. Only their government, only their form of monarchy, not an absolutist monarchy, but a limited monarchy that doesn't claim to be above law and above fundamental right, that only British people get to enjoy. And it's those rights colonists insist that they have by virtue of being British too. So when it becomes clear to them over the course of the 1760s and 1770s that Britain doesn't really think that those same British rights extend to British people living in the colonies, that things can be done to them that would be unthinkable to do to British people living in Britain, the colonists have to think about how they best can protect the rights they thought had been protected, but now seem to no longer be.